Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we return to talking about Don Lemon and CNN. Don recently had a very controversial interview with Terry Crews, an actor, and needless to say, it did not go well for Lemon. Lemon is not going to make lemonade this week, if you know what I'm saying. Basically, Don was confronted with some real truths and some hard facts by Terry Crews, of all people. Terry Crews is, of course, a famous black actor who I've been a fan of his work for a long time, but admittedly, he has gotten very woke and political over recent years. In fact, I was actually blocked by Terry Crews a couple years ago because I confronted some of his tweets when he was talking about like white supremacy or white power or something silly. Like he's very, very woke on the left leaning end. But today he actually said something pretty smart. He's actually been getting a little more privy and a little more intelligent with his thoughts recently. Specifically, Terry Crews has had some controversial things to say about BLM. Black Lives Matter is, of course, a big movement that's getting lots of steam recently. It happened last election season too. In 2016, BLM popped up out of nowhere and they started this whole political thing where they got all these race riots going and they got people all worked up, basically trying to get things going for the election. They wanted things to move towards their left wing side. BLM is not a charity. They're not here to save black lives as they imply. They're actually a political arm of the liberals and the Democrats. They raise money and then send it back to the Democrats through Share Blue and all these other things. So they're really not what they seem. And Terry Crews has caught on to that and he's starting to call them out. He said a few things on Twitter and in public recently. And more famously, he's spoken up on CNN. He called out Don Lemon to his face, and Don Lemon's reaction was totally embarrassing. Like he totally blows it. It's a really bad look for both of them, really. But mostly Don Lemon is getting egg on his face. And it's because Terry Crews is spitting straight facts. We're going to check out this clip, talk about it more soon, get more details, check out the video footage and all that. But first, let's take a quick moment to check out our sponsor. When you see what's going on in our country right now, there's plenty of reason to be concerned, clearly. Social unrest is making life very uncomfortable and it could quickly get worse too. And on top of that, a second wave of this terrible virus is threatening to devastate our economy and our way of life. Will we have a severe food shortage once again this time? Will the supply chains get cut off if people can't work? What if you can't go to the grocery store anymore? These are all realistic dangers we should all be considering, especially if you're not prepared and you're not stocked up on dry food like how I am. That's why I suggest you go to preparewithnobs.com and start building up your emergency food supply right now. And right now, you can also save $100 off a full 4-week supply of delicious, nutritious meals that the whole family will love. Go to preparewithnobs.com today and order your supply and get your great deals also. Great, now that that's out of the way, let's get back to talking about this CNN Terry Crews Don Lemon video. I got a tweet here from PJW who says, Don Lemon seriously trying to argue that children being killed as a result of black-on-black violence at BLM events has nothing to do with Black Lives Mattering. Yeah, that's a good summation. It's a good, very, very true statement because this is what's coming up. There was recently a kid that died. It's very tragic, and it was at a BLM event. And what the point is, and what Terry is trying to bring up, is something we've mentioned for a long time. It's that black-on-black violence is really the issue. If we're talking about BLM and if we really think Black Lives Matter and we want to help them and help their communities and help them live, like if their lives matter and we want to keep them alive, we should be addressing the main sources of the problem. But the real problem is, all BLM wants to talk about is whenever a white cop accidentally kills a black person and then they turn that into a racist situation, even though there's no proven racism, they usually try to put more intent on it, saying it's like a murder or intentional when we don't know that usually going in. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Depends on the story. But the point is, these are the only instances where BLM gets involved. They only bring up stories when it's a white cop killing a black person. Anything else that affects black people, which is a lot. There's a lot of issues out there, but they don't want to talk about it. We've talked about this before, like when we talked about last Father's Day, the last holiday weekend, a lot of people got shot and killed in Chicago. A lot of those were black, like tens of many people, like a lot of people were injured and a few died, and no one wanted to talk about it because that's not what they're concerned about. They don't care about black on black violence. They don't care about fixing the communities from within, encouraging black people to have stronger families, get married before they have kids, raise their kids right, get them educations and teach them not to, hate authority and attack cops and stuff like that. But That's not brought up at all. All they care about is race baiting and trying to turn on white people. So that's why we're at where we are now. So with all that said, let's finally get to the video and see how bad this goes.
And one thing that really
who's the next oppressor? Who's the next oppressor?
Oh, when I describe this, when you look in the city of Chicago, there are 9 children who died by gun violence, by black on black gun violence, from June 20th all the way to today. And you're talking about even with the Atlanta child murders, there were 28 kids who died in 2 years. You're talking about a month, and you have 9 black kids, and the Black Lives Matter movement has said nothing about this.
What does that have to do with equality, though?
What does that have to do with equality? Don Lemon is playing defense. Like, make no mistake, he really, really goes after this and defends BLM like as hard as you can. And it just doesn't really seem like something that a news reporter would do. Like what Terry is asking, like he's actually being more of a reporter because he's asking these questions and looking at facts and pointing out disparities and saying, hey, these many people died. We should be talking about how to fix this situation. There's a lot of deaths here. How come we're just focusing on these 1 or 2 deaths that aren't as relevant, aren't as prevalent as this kind of situation, this kind of crime, these kinds of black on black crimes are happening every day in Chicago. But BLM just wants to focus on certain arrests by certain kinds of cops, like really, really niche kind of focus right there. And it has little to do with actually helping black lives and making sure they matter. I mean, last year we only had 9 black people unarmed being killed by cops, but for some reason they want to act like this is like millions of people and black people are dying all the time. Cops are out there shooting them willy-nilly. It just doesn't happen. The police brutality thing is largely overblown. It's almost a myth, you could say. And Terry Crews has woken up to that. He's like the real woke guy. He's the one that actually acts like a reporter here. But Don Lemon's talking about equality. It's like, what are you even talking about, dude?
Terry, I don't understand what that has to do with equality, because listen, there's crime. There are people in those communities those people aren't just being nonchalant about gun violence. I lived in Chicago. There are many people who are working in those communities to try to get rid of the gun violence. The gun culture in this country is prevalent, but I don't understand what that has to do with a movement that's for equality for black people.
So now he's kind of trying to change the rules of the movement, like it's about equality. I don't think I've ever heard them mention equality. Like Black Lives Matter is the name and the mantra, and they try to act like they're trying to save black people's lives. So that doesn't necessarily have to do with equality. I think he's kind of trying to move the goalposts here. In addition, let's note that he said he lived in Chicago and worked there. And I think that says a lot because we know how corrupt that city is, how taken over by liberals it is. Like Chicago is very, very bad and unsafe for reasons because of people like Don Lemon that are living there, promoting this liberal ideology, this terrible, terrible kind of system. And, this is also where Obama was from. Obama comes from Chicago politics. A lot of these corrupt, terrible leftists have come from this area. And now, basically, Don's trying to deflect. He's like saying, hey, why do we care about these kids dying? It doesn't have to do with equality. I mean, who cares about equality, dude? Like, there is equality. There's no unfair laws. There's no laws against black people. Like what Terry Crews is pointing out is that they're dying in the streets and BLM doesn't even care because their goals aren't what they say they are.
It's not mutually exclusive that if you care about equality for black people, that somehow you're going to stop random violence or, unfortunately, kids from being shot. It just seems like apples and oranges.
It's not that way. This is the thing.
Before he goes into it, though, I mean, he's trying to draw these differences, but it wasn't just random either. Like these people were at a BLM event. This thing was caused by their kinds of chaotic events and those people being unstable, causing riots and strife and different bad things to happen. These kids could have been home reading a book or not at these events. Like, it's not just random and it's not just nothing like Don says. Like, this is a serious problem. And if BLM actually cared, they would be talking about it.
Don, black people need to hold other black people accountable. I said this the same thing. This is the Black America's version of the Me Too movement. If anything is going to change, we ourselves need to look at our own communities and look at each other and say, this thing cannot go down. And this is the thing, too. There are a lot of great, great people there who are held hostage, by people who literally are running these neighborhoods with violence and then claiming that Black Lives Matter.
So yeah, strong words by Terry Crews, well put. Don Lemon is basically rolling his eyes. He doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't care about the truth. He doesn't care about reporting. It's just to him about pushing these narratives. He's on CNN. He's on the most corrupt fake news network there is, and he wants to support BLM. BLM is part of the Democratic Party, just like how CNN is. They're de facto propaganda wing for the Democrats, and the BLM is like the radical in the streets version. It's like another Antifa group. Like Antifa are the radicals who attack stuff and cause riots and fights, and BLM is on board with that too, but they're also kind of pushing this whole race-based thing. Like they're more focused on race and race baiting, but it's not really what they say. Like they try to act like they're stopping and saving us from like racist white people, but really they're just hating white people. They're against white people. So they imply, oh, Black Lives Matter, like, oh, white people don't care about our lives. That's not true. We care about each other. We care about all Americans. Like we want everyone to be safe. That's why we bring up actual problems. Like Terry Crews is talking about these murders in Chicago. We're talking about other crimes across the country. We're talking about black on black violence being the real culprit here. And I think this is like an indirect unintended consequence of BLM. They've tried to play this card too hard. They've played the black card so hard that we're actually starting to realize what the real problems are. And it's not just me. Like I've known about this. We've all talked about this for years, but now we're talking about a Hollywood celebrity, Terry Crews on screen over here. He is not who you'd expect to go along with this. Like I said, this guy has been very left-leaning, very pro-social justice warrior. He's talked about these kinds of white myths, white supremacy, white privilege, and stuff like that. Like he's gone down that road, but he's finally waking up. And I think this is going to actually happen with a lot of leftists like him, a lot of strong independent thinkers who aren't afraid to speak out. We're seeing this happen every day. Like BLM has pushed it too far. The Democrats have overplayed their hand. Now we're dealing with this outbreak of kind of the truth, like people actually getting woke. And Don Lemon's trying to resist, but he's failing. He's just a terrible, terrible person. He's got a lot of hate in his heart. And he's also just, sold his soul to the devil and will say whatever it takes to push his liberal narratives. That about wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Also hit that like button to get this thing shared. Subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell for notifications. Also check out our second channel, NoBS News. And until next time, have a great day.